Secret's hands bled as she clawed at the frozen earth, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The shovel lay broken beside her, snapped clean in half an hour ago. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when the first snow was already falling, and the wood stacked behind her cabin was still green, still wet, still useless. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Wet wood won't save you, Secret. It'll kill you slower than the cold will." She dug faster, her fingernails splitting against the rock. 16 years old, alone, and the whole town thought she was insane. Before we continue, if you're finding this story gripping, please subscribe to our channel and stay with me until the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far Secret's story has traveled. Secret wiped the blood from her palms onto her worn jeans and stared at the hole she'd been digging for 3 days straight. It wasn't much, maybe 6 feet deep, 4 feet wide, but it was a start. Behind her, the cabin door hung crooked on its hinges, banging in the wind, like it was trying to tell her something she didn't want to hear. "You're gonna kill yourself out here." She didn't turn around. She knew that voice. Martha Hendricks, the woman who ran the general store in town. The woman who'd promised Secret's mother she'd check in after the funeral. That was 4 months ago. This was the first time Martha had bothered to make the trip up the hill. "I'm fine," Secret said. "You're not fine. You're a child playing in the dirt." "I'm 16. Exactly, a child." Secret finally turned, and Martha took a step back. There was something in the girl's eyes that hadn't been there before the flood. Something hard and sharp and unbreakable. "My father wasn't playing when he taught me this," Secret said quietly. "And I'm not playing now." Martha's expression softened, but only slightly. "Your father had experience, Secret. He had tools, he had help, he had nothing when he started either," Secret interrupted. "He told me about the first winter he and Grandpa spent up in the Boundary Waters. They would have frozen if Grandpa hadn't figured out the airflow system. That's what I'm building. That's what's going to get me through this winter. By digging a hole in the ground? It's not just a hole. It's a tunnel. The air moves through it, pulls the moisture out of the wood faster than any sun could do in this climate. 3 weeks instead of 6 months. My father proved it worked." Martha shook her head slowly. "Your father also had a wife who kept him fed and warm while he worked on his projects. You're alone up here, Secret. You need to come back to town. The church has offered—" "I don't need the church's charity. It's not charity, it's—" "Yes, it is," Secret's voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. "It's charity, and I won't take it. I won't be another burden for people to gossip about over their Sunday dinners." Martha's lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't gossip." "Yes, you do. I heard what Mrs. Patterson said at the post office last week, about how my mother should have known better than to follow my father to that creek during flood season, about how they were always chasing some dream instead of being practical." "Secret, I'm sure she didn't mean—" "She meant it. They all mean it. And maybe they're right about my parents. Maybe they were dreamers. But at least they taught me how to survive when the dreaming stops." The wind picked up, and Odin, her father's Norwegian elkhound, pressed against Secret's leg. The dog had barely left her side since the funeral. Sometimes, Secret thought Odin understood what had happened better than most of the people in town. Martha pulled her coat tighter. "The Carlsons are willing to pay you to help with their wood this winter. It's honest work, and it would give you enough money to—" "To what? Buy firewood from them at twice the price they'd pay me to cut it? No, thank you. You can't do this alone. Watch me." Martha stared at her for a long moment, and Secret could see the exact moment when the woman gave up. It was always the same look, pity mixed with relief. Relief that Secret wasn't her problem to solve. "When you change your mind," Martha said softly, "the offer stands." She left without waiting for a response. Secret listened to the old truck rattle back down the hill, and then she picked up a piece of the broken shovel and went back to digging. By nightfall, her hands were raw and her shoulders screamed with every movement, but she'd made progress. Another foot deeper, another 2 feet to the left. The tunnel was starting to take shape. Not that anyone would recognize it for what it was. Not yet. Inside the cabin, she lit the last of her good firewood and watched the flames dance. The pile wouldn't last more than a week, maybe 2 if she was careful. After that, she'd be burning green wood, wet wood, the kind that smoked more than it burned, the kind that would fill her lungs with poison while barely keeping the cold at bay. "We've got 3 weeks," she told Odin. The dog's ears perked up at her voice. 3 weeks to get that tunnel finished and the wood inside. Then we pray Dad was right about the airflow. Odin whined softly, and Secret scratched behind his ears. "I know, boy. I miss them too." Her father's journal lay open on the table. The same journal he'd kept since she was a baby, filled with sketches and notes about every project he'd ever attempted. The tunnel design took up 4 full pages, complete with measurements and calculations about air pressure and moisture content. Her mother had written in the margins, "This is crazy, but it might just work." Secret traced her mother's handwriting with one finger. "It will work, Mama. I'll make sure of it." A knock at the door made her jump. Odin growled low in his throat. "It's just me," a young voice called out. "Don't sick your wolf on me." Secret opened the door to find Tommy Carlson standing on her porch, a canvas bag in his hands. He was 14, all gangly limbs and nervous energy, and one of the few people in town who didn't look at her like she was already dead. "Ma sent soup," he said, thrusting the bag at her. "Don't make it weird. She made too much, and Dad can't eat the beans anymore because of his stomach." Secret took the bag. The soup was still warm. "Thank your mother for me." "She says you should come by the house. Says you can stay in the spare room if you want." "I'm fine here." Tommy glanced past her at the meager fire in the hearth. "You're burning through your wood awful fast." "I'm managing." "No, you're not." He said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. "I saw your pile out back. That's maybe 2 weeks of heat if you're lucky. Less if it gets real cold." "I have a plan." "The tunnel thing?" Secret's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about that?" "Mrs. Hendricks told my ma. Ma told Dad. Dad told everyone at the mill." Tommy shrugged. "People talk." "And what do they say?" The boy hesitated, and Secret felt her stomach tighten. "Just tell me, Tommy." "They say you're wasting your time. They say even if you get the tunnel built, it won't work. Not in Minnesota. Too damp, too cold. They say your dad's design might have worked somewhere else, but not here." "My father was born here. He knew this land better than anyone." "I know. I believe you." Tommy's voice was earnest. "But they don't. They think you're going to freeze to death up here trying to prove something that can't be proven." Secret gripped the doorframe. "Then they'll be surprised when I'm still alive come spring." Tommy smiled. A small, sad thing. "I hope so, Secret. I really do." After he left, Secret ate the soup mechanically, barely tasting it. The cabin felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in. Odin watched her with dark, knowing eyes. "I'm not crazy," she whispered to the dog. "Am I?" Odin laid his head on her lap, and Secret let herself cry for the first time since the funeral. Great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her parents, for the life she'd lost, for the fear that maybe, just maybe, the town was right. But when the tears stopped, she wiped her face and opened her father's journal again. This time, she read his final entry, dated 2 days before the flood. "Secret's growing up faster than I'm ready for. She asks questions I don't always have answers to. Today she wanted to know why we live the way we do, why we're always trying new things when the old ways work fine for everyone else. I told her the truth. Because safe isn't the same as alive. Because the world changes, and we have to change with it, or get swept away. I showed her the tunnel design today. She understood it immediately, saw the potential in a way most adults never would. Whatever happens to me and Sarah, I know Secret will be okay. She's stronger than she knows. Secret closed the journal and pressed it to her chest. I'll prove you right, Dad. I swear it. The next morning, she was back at the tunnel before sunrise. Her hands were stiff and sore, wrapped in strips of torn bedsheet, but she worked anyway, one shovelful at a time, 1 foot of earth at a time. Around noon, she heard voices approaching, multiple voices. She straightened up, squinting into the autumn sun, and felt her heart sink. 5 men from town stood at the edge of her property. She recognized them all. Bill Patterson, who owned the hardware store, Tom Jensen, the town's part-time sheriff, Dan Carlson, Tommy's father, and 2 others whose names she couldn't quite remember. "Gentlemen," she said carefully. Bill Patterson stepped forward. He was a big man, barrel-chested and red-faced, the kind who thought his size gave him authority. "Miss Brennan, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "This tunnel of yours, it's becoming a problem." Secret's grip tightened on the shovel handle. "How is my tunnel anyone's problem but mine?" "Because you're making a spectacle of yourself," Bill said. "You're a young woman living alone in the wilderness, digging holes like some kind of—" He seemed to catch himself, but Secret filled in the blank anyway. "Like some kind of what, Mr. Patterson? Crazy person? Fool?" "Like someone who needs guidance," Sheriff Jensen interjected smoothly. "Your father was a good man, Secret, but even he would want you to be practical. Come winter, this tunnel won't do you any good. You need proper shelter, proper supplies. I have shelter, and I'm building my own supplies." Dan Carlson spoke up, his voice gentler than the others. "Secret, please listen. My boy Tommy thinks the world of you, says you're the smartest person he knows. But smart doesn't mean safe. That cabin of yours barely kept your parents warm with both of them working to maintain it. You can't do this alone. Then help me." The words hung in the air. Secret hadn't planned to say them, but now that they were out, she didn't take them back. Bill Patterson laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Help you dig a useless hole? I don't think so." "It's not useless. My father's design works. The airflow creates a natural dehumidifier, pulls moisture out of green wood in a fraction of the time. 3 weeks, and I'll have dry firewood for the whole winter." "That's impossible," one of the other men said. "It's science. Air pressure, humidity, temperature gradients. My grandfather used this method in northern Canada. My father refined it here. I have his notes, his calculations." "Notes from a man who got himself and his wife killed chasing a flood?" Bill interrupted. "Forgive me if I don't put much stock in his engineering." Secret felt something snap inside her. The shovel was in her hands before she knew she'd moved, raised like a weapon. "Get off my property." The men stepped back, hands raised. "Easy now," Sheriff Jensen said. "Get off my property." Each word came out hard and cold. "All of you. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't ask for your opinions. This is my land, my cabin, my tunnel. If you don't like what I'm doing, then don't watch." "We're trying to help you, girl," Bill said. "No, you're not. You're trying to make yourselves feel better about leaving a 16-year-old orphan to fend for herself. Well, consider yourselves absolved. I don't need your help, and I don't want your pity. Now leave before I call this trespassing." Dan Carlson looked genuinely pained. "Secret, please." "Leave." They went, muttering among themselves. Secret stood there shaking, the shovel still gripped in her white-knuckled hands, until they were out of sight. Then she collapsed to her knees and let the shovel fall. Odin was there immediately, pressing against her, grounding her. She buried her face in his fur and tried to breathe. "I can do this," she whispered. "I can do this. I can do this." But the doubt had crept in now, cold and insidious. What if they were right? What if she was wasting her time? What if her father's design only worked in theory, not in practice? She thought about the soup Tommy's mother had sent, about the church's offer, about the spare room at the Carlsons' house. It would be so easy to give up, to admit defeat, to let someone else take care of her. But then what? She'd be another charity case, another reminder of what happens when you dream too big. She'd watch other people live their lives while she existed on the edges of theirs, forever grateful, forever diminished. No. Secret stood up and picked up the shovel. Her hands screamed in protest, but she ignored them. She had 3 weeks until the first hard freeze. 3 weeks to prove everyone wrong. Starting now. The tunnel took shape slowly, painfully. Every morning, Secret woke before dawn and dug. Every night, she fell into bed too exhausted to dream. Her hands developed calluses on top of calluses. Her shoulders grew strong. Her back learned to bend without breaking. She worked alone, except for Odin. The dog seemed to understand the importance of her task, staying close but quiet, occasionally bringing her water from the creek in an old bucket she'd taught him to carry. On the 10th day, she hit rock, a massive granite shelf that cut straight through her planned tunnel path. She spent an hour just staring at it, her father's journal open in her lap, trying to figure out an alternative route. "Miss Brennan?" She looked up to find a stranger standing at the edge of her property, an old man with a weathered face and knowing eyes. He wore clothes that had seen better decades, and he carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from surviving hard things. "Can I help you?" Secret asked warily. "Name's Joseph Whitehorse. Used to work with your grandfather up in the Boundary Waters. Heard you were trying to build one of his air tunnels." Secret's heart stuttered. "You knew my grandfather?" "Knew him? Hell, I helped him build the first one. Must have been..." Joseph squinted at the sky, calculating. 35 years ago now? Maybe 40. We were just kids then, barely older than you are now. "Did it work?" Joseph smiled, a slow, genuine thing. "Saved our lives that winter. We had green aspen that wouldn't burn worth a damn. But 3 weeks in that tunnel, and it burned hot enough to keep a whole camp warm. Your grandfather was a genius, in his own way." Secret felt tears prick her eyes. "Everyone here thinks I'm crazy." "Everyone here doesn't know what they're talking about." Joseph walked closer, studying the tunnel entrance. "You've got the angle wrong, though. Needs to be steeper for the airflow to work proper." "I followed my father's notes exactly." "Your father was adapting it for different terrain. Minnesota clay isn't the same as Canadian permafrost. You need to account for the soil density." He pulled out a worn piece of paper and a pencil stub from his pocket. "May I?" Secret handed him her father's journal, and Joseph spent the next hour sketching adjustments, explaining the physics in simple terms that made sense. The rock shelf wasn't a problem. It was an advantage. It would reflect the airflow, create a natural circulation pattern. "Why are you helping me?" Secret finally asked. Joseph looked at her with ancient, sad eyes. "Because your grandfather helped me when no one else would. Because I was there when your father was born, and I held him while your grandmother died. Because family helps family, even when the blood's spread thin and the years have piled up high." "We're family?" "Your grandfather married my sister. That makes you my great-niece, near as I can figure." He handed back the journal. "I would have come sooner, But I only just heard about your parents. I'm sorry, Secret. They were good people. Secret couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Joseph stood slowly, his joints creaking. I can't stay. Got my own homestead to tend 3 valleys over. But I'll check on you when I can. Meantime, you follow those adjustments. And don't let the small minds in that town make you doubt what you know is true. He left as quietly as he'd come, and Secret stared at the revised plans with something like hope blooming in her chest. The next morning, she started digging again, this time at the correct angle. The tunnel progressed faster after that. The new angle made the work easier, and the rock shelf did exactly what Joseph said it would. By the end of week 2, she had a tunnel 8 feet deep and 15 feet long, with a natural air channel that pulled a steady breeze through whenever the wind blew from the northwest. She started moving the green wood inside, stacking it carefully according to her father's notes. The logs needed space between them for airflow, needed to be arranged so the moisture could escape. It was back-breaking work, and she could only move a few pieces at a time. But she worked systematically, and by the end of week 3, she had half her winter's worth of wood inside the tunnel. That's when the first snow fell. Secret stood outside her cabin and watched the flakes drift down, thick and heavy. It was early, too early, and her stomach clenched with fear. She wasn't ready. The tunnel wasn't full yet, and the wood that was inside hadn't had enough time to dry. Please, she whispered to the sky, to her parents, to anyone who might be listening. Just a little more time. But the snow didn't stop. It fell all day and into the night, blanketing everything in white silence. By morning, there were 4 inches on the ground, and the temperature had dropped 20 degrees. Secret checked the tunnel with shaking hands. The wood inside was cold to the touch, but when she struck 2 pieces together, they didn't sound wet anymore. They sounded different. Drier. Harder. She carried a piece back to the cabin and placed it in the hearth. It took longer to catch than fully dried wood would, but when it finally lit, it burned clean and hot. No smoke, no hissing, just steady, reliable heat. Secret sat back on her heels and started laughing and crying at the same time, her whole body shaking with relief and triumph and grief all mixed together. It works, Dad, she said to the empty cabin. It actually works. Odin barked, a sharp, happy sound, and Secret pulled him into a hug. For the first time since the funeral, she felt something besides fear and exhaustion. She felt hope. And she felt ready to prove to this whole damn town that Secret Brennan was not a girl to be pitied. She was a survivor. The next morning brought Mrs. Patterson to her door. The woman didn't knock, just pushed her way inside like she owned the place, her eyes scanning every corner of the cabin with undisguised disapproval. "You're burning wood," she said flatly. Secret didn't look up from the pot of oatmeal she was stirring. "People tend to do that in winter." "Don't get smart with me, girl. That wood shouldn't be dry yet. Where did you get it?" "From my tunnel." Mrs. Patterson's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Your tunnel. Right. And I suppose next you'll tell me it performs miracles, too." Secret finally met her eyes. "I'm not telling you anything. I'm asking you to leave my home. Bill sent me up here to check on you. Said you looked half-starved last time he saw you. Your husband trespassed on my property and insulted my father's memory. Now you're doing the same. The door's behind you." Mrs. Patterson's face flushed red. "Your father was a dreamer who got himself killed. Your mother was a fool who followed him. And you're headed down the exact same path." Secret moved so fast that Mrs. Patterson stumbled backward. "Get out! Now!" "You think you're so special, don't you? Think you're better than the rest of us because you've got your little hole in the ground and your dead daddy's journal. Well, let me tell you something. I said, get out! Secret's voice cracked like a whip, and Odin was suddenly there, lips pulled back from his teeth in a warning growl. Mrs. Patterson fled, slamming the door so hard the cabin shook. Secret stood there trembling, her hands clenched into fists, until she heard the woman's truck roar away down the hill.
I hate her, she whispered. I hate all of them.
But that wasn't quite true, and she knew it. She hated their pity. She hated their condescension. But most of all, she hated that part of her still wanted their approval, still wanted them to see her as something other than a tragic mistake. She forced herself to eat the oatmeal, even though it tasted like ash. She needed her strength. The wood in the tunnel was drying, but not fast enough. She needed at least another week before the really cold weather hit, and the sky outside looked like it had other plans. By midday, the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Secret worked frantically, moving more wood into the tunnel, stacking it according to Joseph's instructions. Her breath came out in white clouds, and her fingers were numb despite her gloves. Secret! She turned to find Tommy running up the hill, his face flushed with cold and exertion. What's wrong? Radio says there's a big storm coming, real big.
Dad says it could be the worst one in 20 years.
Tommy bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for air.
He wanted me to tell you. Wanted me to ask if you'll come stay with us until it passes.
Secret's heart sank. How big?
Week long, maybe more. Temperatures down to -20, winds up to 60 miles an hour.
Tommy looked up at her, and his eyes were scared.
You can't stay up here alone, Secret. You'll die. I have my tunnel. I have my wood. You have half-dried wood and a hole in the ground. That's not enough. It will be. You don't know that.
Secret grabbed his shoulders.
Yes, I do. Tommy, listen to me. My father spent his whole life preparing me for this. The tunnel works. The wood is drying. I'll be fine.
What if you're wrong?
Then I'll die doing exactly what I was meant to do.
She saw his face crumple and softened her voice.
But I'm not wrong. Trust me. Please.
Tommy wiped his eyes with his sleeve.
Ma's gonna be real mad when I come back without you.
Tell her thank you. Tell her I appreciate the offer more than she knows. But this is where I belong. After he left, Secret worked until her body screamed for rest. She moved wood until the tunnel was 3/4 full. She checked and rechecked the airflow, making sure the circulation was optimal. She reinforced the cabin's windows with spare boards and sealed every crack she could find in the walls. The snow started falling again that night, heavier than before. Secret lay in bed listening to the wind howl. Odin pressed against her side and tried not to think about what Tommy had said. Week-long storm, -20, 60-mile winds.
We'll be okay, she told Odin. We'll be fine.
The dog whined softly, and Secret wondered which of them she was trying to convince. The storm hit 3 days later with a violence that took her breath away.
Secret woke to a world of white chaos, the wind screaming like something alive and angry.
The cabin groaned under the assault, and snow forced its way through cracks she'd thought were sealed. She fed the fire carefully, testing another piece of tunnel-dried wood. It burned even better than the first one, the flames hot and steady. Relief flooded through her. It was working. The tunnel was actually working. But when she tried to open the door to check on her wood supply, the wind nearly ripped it from her hands. Snow blasted into the cabin, stinging her face, blinding her. She shoved the door closed and leaned against it, heart pounding. This was worse than anything she'd prepared for. Worse than anything her father had described. This was the kind of storm that killed people, that buried entire homesteads under 10 feet of snow and didn't let go until spring. "We're not going outside," she told Odin. "Not until this passes." She rationed the wood carefully, burning just enough to keep the cabin above freezing. The tunnel was only 50 feet away, but it might as well have been 50 miles. The storm raged on, hour after hour, day after day. Secret lost track of time. She slept in fits and starts, waking to feed the fire, to melt snow for water, to wonder if this was how she'd die. Slowly, freezing, alone except for a dog and her father's ghost. On what she thought was the fourth day, she heard something over the wind, a sound that didn't belong. Odin heard it too, his ears perking up, a low growl building in his throat. Someone was knocking on her door. Secret grabbed her father's rifle, the one she barely knew how to use, and approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" "It's Dan Carlson. Please, let me in." She opened the door just wide enough for him to stumble through, then slammed it shut against the wind. Dan collapsed on her floor, covered in snow, shaking violently. "What are you doing here?" Secret demanded. "Tommy." Dan's teeth chattered so hard he could barely speak. "Tommy ran away, said he was coming to check on you. That was yesterday morning. We've been searching, but we can't find him in this—" His voice broke. "Please, please tell me he made it here." Secret's blood turned to ice. "He's not here. I haven't seen him since 3 days ago." Oh God, he's out there somewhere." "Stop." Secret knelt beside him. "Stop. We'll find him. But first, you need to warm up before you're useless to everyone." She pulled him closer to the fire, wrapped him in her one spare blanket. His lips were blue, his fingers white. Frostbite, maybe. She'd seen it before. "Why did you come alone?" she asked. "Sheriff Jensen's out searching the south side. Bill Patterson and some others are checking the road. I thought maybe—" Dan's voice trailed off. "I thought maybe Tommy would head for you. He talks about you all the time, about how brave you are, how strong." Something twisted in Secret's chest. "He's a good kid. He's my son. He's all I've got left since his mother passed." Dan looked at her with desperate eyes. "You know what it's like to lose people. You know what I'm feeling right now." Secret did know. She knew exactly. The same terror, the same helplessness, the same bargaining with a God who didn't seem to be listening. "We'll wait for the wind to die down," she said. "Then we search together." "I can't wait. Every minute he's out there. Every minute you're out there without proper preparation, you're a dead man. And what good will you be to Tommy then?" She spoke harshly because gentleness wouldn't reach him right now. "You drink this tea. You warm up. You get your strength back. Then we go." Dan wanted to argue. She could see it in his face. But he was too cold, too exhausted. He took the tea with shaking hands. Secret moved to the window, staring out at the white wall of snow. Somewhere out there was a 14-year-old boy who'd run into a blizzard because he was worried about her. The guilt was crushing. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "No, it's not. Tommy makes his own choices. Always has." Dan sipped the tea. "He believes in you, you know. Really believes. Says you're going to prove everyone wrong, that your tunnel's going to work, that you're going to survive this winter better than any of us." "He shouldn't have that much faith in me. I'm just trying to stay alive." "That's exactly why he believes in you. Because you don't give up." Dan set down the teacup. "I need to tell you something. The night after I came up here with those other men, Tommy got into it with me. told me I was a coward and a fool. Said his mother would have been ashamed of me for trying to run you off your own land." Secret turned from the window.
He said that?
He was right, too. I was ashamed. Am ashamed. We came up here acting like we were doing you a favor, when really, we just wanted you to be someone else's problem. Dan's voice roughened. Your father and I went to school together. Did you know that? We weren't friends exactly, but we weren't enemies either. When he died, I should have stepped up. Should have made sure you had what you needed. Instead, I sent my kid with a bag of soup and called it charity. You offered me work. At half what I'd pay a man for the same job, and you knew it. Dan stood, still shaky, but stronger now. If we find Tommy, if he's okay, I'm going to make this right. I'm going to help you finish that tunnel properly. Me and anyone else I can drag up here. I don't need, yes you do, and we need to give it. He met her eyes. Please, let us help. Not out of pity, out of respect. Secret wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her pride, her independence. But Tommy was out there in the storm because of her. And if that wasn't a sign that she couldn't do this completely alone, she didn't know what was. Okay, she said. Okay. The wind finally died down an hour later, shifting from a scream to a moan to an eerie silence. Secret and Dan bundled up in every piece of warm clothing they could find. She brought rope, her father's compass, and a lantern. Dan had nothing but his determination. We tie ourselves together, Secret said. 20 feet of rope between us. If one of us falls, the other can pull them out. We call out Tommy's name every 30 seconds. We search in a spiral pattern starting from my cabin. Understood? Dan nodded, and Secret saw new respect in his eyes. She wasn't just a scared girl anymore. She was someone who knew how to survive. They pushed out into the snow, and Secret's breath caught at the destruction. Drifts 10 feet high. Trees snapped like toothpicks. The world had been remade into something alien and hostile. Tommy! Dan's voice was raw with fear. Tommy, can you hear me? They moved slowly, methodically, Secret's compass keeping them oriented. The cold was brutal, seeping through every layer of clothing. Her face felt like it was being stabbed with needles. But she kept moving, kept searching, kept calling. Tommy, it's Secret! If you can hear me, make a sound! Nothing. Just the wind and their own labored breathing. They searched for an hour, 2 hours. Secret's feet were going numb, her hands losing feeling despite the gloves. Beside her, Dan stumbled more frequently, his movements growing sluggish. We need to go back, Secret said. We need to warm up and try again. No, he's out here somewhere. And we'll be dead before we find him if we don't take care of ourselves. Secret grabbed his arm. Dan, listen to me. I know you're scared. I know you want to find him right now. But we're no good to Tommy if we freeze to death. We go back, we warm up, we search again. That's how we survive this. Dan's face crumpled, but he nodded. They turned back toward the cabin, following their own half-filled footprints through the snow. That's when they heard it. A sound so faint, Secret almost missed it. Barking. Odin? Secret spun around, trying to locate the sound. Odin, where are you? The barking came again, more insistent now. East of their position, maybe 50 yards away. Secret started running, the rope jerking Dan along behind her. She found Odin digging frantically the snowdrift, his paws bloody, his breath coming in desperate pants. And underneath the snow, barely visible, was a patch of blue fabric. Tommy's coat. Help me dig! Secret fell to her knees, clawing at the snow with her hands. Dan was beside her instantly, both of them digging with frantic energy. Odin dug too, his big paws moving snow faster than human hands could. They uncovered Tommy's face first. His lips were blue, his skin white, his eyes closed. Secret pressed her ear to his chest, and for one horrible moment she heard nothing. Then, faint, so faint, a heartbeat. "He's alive!" she screamed. "He's alive, but we need to move, now!" Between them, they pulled Tommy from the snow and half-carried, half-dragged him back to the cabin. Secret's lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. They burst through the cabin door and laid Tommy in front of the fire. His body was rigid with cold, his breathing shallow. Secret had seen hypothermia before, had seen what happened when it went too far. "We need to warm him up slowly," she said, her voice shaking. "Too fast and his heart could stop. We need dry clothes, blankets, warm water. Not hot, just warm." They worked together with desperate efficiency. Secret stripped off Tommy's wet clothes, while Dan prepared warm water. They wrapped him in every blanket she owned, held warm compresses to his neck and wrists and groin, the places where blood flowed closest to the surface. "Come on, Tommy," Dan whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Come on, son. Come back to me." Tommy's eyelids flickered. His fingers twitched. And then, slowly, painfully, his eyes opened. "Dad?" His voice was barely audible. "Secret?" "We're here," Secret said, and she was crying too now. "We're both here. You're safe." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. The storm was so bad, and I thought—" Tommy's voice broke. "I thought you'd be alone and scared." Secret gripped his hand. "I'm okay. I'm fine. But you could have died, Tommy." "I know." He closed his eyes again, exhausted beyond measure. "But you're worth it. Someone has to believe in you." Dan sobbed openly now, pressing his son's hand to his forehead. Secret turned away, giving them privacy, and found herself staring at the fire, at the tunnel-dried wood burning hot and steady. Tommy had almost died because he believed in her, because she'd made him think she could handle this alone. Maybe Dan was right. Maybe she did need help. Not out of weakness, but out of respect for the people who cared enough to offer it. The storm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, 3 people and a dog huddled together around a fire that refused to die. And for the first time since her parents' death, Secret Brennan understood that survival wasn't just about being strong enough to stand alone. Sometimes, it was about being brave enough to let others stand with you. Tommy slept for 16 hours straight. Secret and Dan took turns keeping watch, feeding the fire, monitoring his breathing. When the boy finally woke, his first words were about the storm. "Is it still going?" Secret nodded. She was sitting beside him, her own exhaustion pulling at her bones. 3 days now, maybe 4. I've lost count. The others, did they find shelter? Dan leaned forward. What others? Tommy struggled to sit up, wincing. Sheriff Jensen and Mr. Patterson. They were still out searching when I left. I saw their lights from the ridge before I fell. Secret and Dan exchanged looks. The same thought written across both their faces. They could be dead by now, Dan said quietly. Or they could be alive and freezing. Secret stood, her decision made. I'm going to ring the bell. What bell? She moved to the corner of the cabin and pulled out an old brass bell, tarnished but solid. My grandfather's. He used it to signal for help during emergencies. Sound carries far in this kind of cold. You'll just bring more people up here to die, Dan protested.
Or I'll give people a beacon to follow, a place to survive.
Secret met his eyes.
I have wood that burns. I have shelter. What I don't have is the right to keep it to myself while people freeze to death out there.
She pushed open the door, and the cold hit like a fist. The storm had eased slightly, the wind down to a steady howl instead of a shriek. But the temperature had dropped even further. Secret's breath crystallized instantly. She rang the bell, the sound cutting through the white silence, over and over until her arms ached. Then she waited. Nothing happened for an hour. Then 2. Secret was about to give up when she heard voices, distant, desperate, coming from the south.
Here! Over here!
She screamed, ringing the bell again. 3 figures emerged from the snow. Sheriff Jensen, Bill Patterson, and someone else Secret didn't recognize at first. They stumbled toward the cabin like dead men walking, and Secret realized with horror that the third person was Mrs. Patterson. They collapsed through the door, and Secret slammed it shut behind them.
What were you thinking?
Dan was on his feet, furious.
All 3 of you out in this?
We were looking for Tommy, Jensen gasped.
His face was gray, his words slurred.
Got separated from each other. Found Bill and Martha about an hour ago. They were lost, going in circles. Mrs. Patterson was crying, her whole body shaking.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I told Bill we should turn back, but he wouldn't listen. And then we couldn't find our way and—
Save it, Secret cut her off. She turned to Dan. We need more wood. The fire's not going to keep 5 people warm on what we've got burning now. 6 people, Tommy corrected weakly from his pile of blankets. You're not people. You're a popsicle, Secret shot back. But there was no heat in it. Stay there and keep warm. She and Dan bundled up again. The tunnel was so close, just 50 feet. But those 50 feet felt like miles. They roped themselves together and pushed out into the storm. The snow had drifted against the tunnel entrance, and they had to dig frantically to clear it. Secret's hands were numb within minutes, her face burning with cold.
But when they finally got inside, the relief was immediate.
The tunnel blocked the wind, and the temperature inside was at least 20 degrees warmer than outside.
It actually works,
Dan breathed, staring around in wonder.
Your father's design actually works.
Of course it does. Secret started loading wood into a canvas sack. Help me carry. They made 3 trips, moving as much wood as they could. By the 3rd trip, Secret's legs were shaking with exhaustion, but she pushed through. 6 people. She had 6 people depending on her now. When they finally got back inside, the cabin was warm again, the fire roaring. But the space felt cramped, suffocating. 6 people, 1 dog, and barely enough room to breathe. Bill Patterson was sitting up now, some color back in his face. He looked at Secret, and something shifted in his expression. Shame, maybe, or respect. I owe you an apology, he said gruffly. You owe me more than that, Secret replied.
But right now, I need you to make yourself useful. There's a pot in the corner. Fill it with snow and melt it for drinking water. Can you do that?
Bill nodded and got to work without argument. Mrs. Patterson watched him, then looked at Secret with red-rimmed eyes. I said terrible things about your parents.
Yes, you did.
I was wrong. Secret paused in her task of organizing blankets.
Why? Because I saved your life? Because my tunnel worked? Or because you finally realized that maybe, just maybe, my family knew what they were doing?
Mrs. Patterson flinched. All of those things. Your apology doesn't change what you said. Doesn't erase it. Secret's voice was hard. But I'll accept it anyway. Because we're all going to be stuck in here together until this storm passes. And I don't have the energy to hold grudges right now." The older woman nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Secret turned away, uncomfortable with the emotion. Sheriff Jensen spoke up from his spot by the fire. "How much wood do you have left?" "In the tunnel? Maybe 2 weeks' worth at normal usage. But we're not at normal usage anymore." Secret did the math in her head, her stomach sinking. "With 6 of us, keeping the fire hot enough to prevent hypothermia, maybe 5 days. A week if we're lucky." "And the storm?" "Radio went dead yesterday. I don't know when it'll end." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. 5 days of wood, an unknown length of storm. 6 people trapped in a cabin barely big enough for one. Tommy broke the tension. "We should tell stories." Everyone turned to look at him. "My ma used to say that stories keep you warm when nothing else can. We should take turns, tell about our lives, about the things we remember." He looked at Secret. "Tell us about your dad, about the good things." Secret opened her mouth to refuse, then saw the hope in his face, the desperate need for something other than fear and cold and waiting to die. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." She told them about the summer her father taught her to fish, about the time they built a raft that sank immediately, about the Christmas her mother made snow angels until the whole yard was covered in wings. The stories came haltingly at first, then easier, and soon others joined in. Dan talked about his late wife. Jensen shared memories of his daughter who lived out east. Even Bill Patterson had stories about his childhood, about dreams he'd abandoned. Mrs. Patterson was the last to speak. "I had a son," she said softly, "before we moved here. He would have been about Tommy's age now." The cabin went quiet. "He drowned in a river. We were picnicking, and he wanted to wade in, and I said yes because it looked shallow. But there was a current, a hidden drop-off, and he was gone before we could reach him." Her voice broke. "Your mother reminded me of him. Always adventurous, always chasing something just out of reach. When I heard she died in a flood, all I could think was that she'd made the same mistake I did. And I hated her for it. Hated her for being reckless, for leaving you alone, for surviving as long as she did," Secret finished. Her throat was tight. "For teaching me to survive, too." Mrs. Patterson nodded, unable to speak. The stories continued through the night, weaving together until they felt less like strangers trapped together, and more like people sharing a burden. But the woodpile kept shrinking, and the storm showed no signs of stopping. On the morning of day 6, Secret woke to an argument. Bill and Jensen were shouting at each other, their voices sharp with panic. "We need to make a run for town," Bill was saying. "Get more supplies, more wood." "In this weather? That's suicide," Jensen shot back. "Staying here is suicide. We're burning through wood faster than she can replenish it." Secret sat up. "Don't talk about me like I'm not here." Bill whirled on her. "How much wood is left? Truth." "Maybe 3 days' worth?" "And you didn't think to tell us?" "I didn't think you needed more reasons to panic." Secret stood, grabbing her coat. "I'm going to get more from the tunnel." "I'll come with you," Dan offered. "No, you stay here and keep these two from killing each other." She looked at Tommy. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Stronger." "Good. I might need you soon." Outside, the storm had shifted again. The wind had picked up, but the snow had lessened. Secret fought her way to the tunnel, her mind racing through options. 3 days of wood. Maybe 4 if they rationed carefully. But 6 people couldn't survive on rationing alone. She was loading wood when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. Voices. Multiple voices. Coming from the direction of town. Secret scrambled out of the tunnel and squinted into the white. Dark shapes were moving up the hill. People. A lot of people. Her heart sank. More mouths to feed, more bodies to keep warm, more... "Secret Brennan!" The voice was Joseph Whitehorse's, cutting through the wind. "We need your help!" She ran toward them and stopped dead. There were at least 20 people, maybe more, all of them looking half-frozen and desperate. Joseph was at the front, supported by 2 younger men. "What happened?" "Town's without power," Joseph gasped. "Pipes froze, burst. Half the homes are flooding, the other half are ice boxes. We heard your bell yesterday, figured you might have shelter." Secret looked at the crowd, her mind reeling. 20 people, maybe 30. Her wood wouldn't last 2 days. "I can't," she said, and the words felt like broken glass. "I don't have enough. I'm sorry, but I can't." "We brought supplies," one of the younger men interrupted. He gestured to the sleds they were pulling. "Food, blankets, tools. We can help you get more wood from your tunnel. Help you keep the fire going." "It's not about help. It's about physics. I don't have enough wood to keep 30 people alive." "Then we'll freeze together instead of separately," Joseph said firmly. "That's what community means, Secret. We survive together, or we die together." Secret wanted to scream, wanted to tell them all to leave, to save themselves, to not put this impossible weight on her shoulders. But Tommy's words echoed in her head. "Someone has to believe in you." "Fine," she said, "but we do this my way. We organize, we ration, we work together. No panic, no fighting, no giving up. Understood?" The crowd murmured agreement, and Secret led them back to the cabin. Dan's eyes went wide when he saw the group. "We'll never fit everyone inside," he said. "Then we make more space." Secret turned to the crowd. "Anyone here know how to build a snow shelter?" 3 hands went up. Secret pointed to them. "You 3, take half the group and start building lean-tos against the cabin. Use the snow itself for insulation. The rest of you, we're going to form a chain from the tunnel to the fire. We move wood continuously. We keep the fire going no matter what." They worked through the day and into the night. The snow shelters went up quickly, crude but functional. The wood chain operated with brutal efficiency. Someone found Secret's father's old saw and started cutting logs into smaller pieces to make them burn longer. But the wood kept disappearing, and the temperature kept dropping. On day 8, Secret sat by the fire and did the math one more time. They had maybe a day's worth of wood left. 1 day. After that, they'd be burning furniture, then the cabin itself, then nothing. Tommy sat down beside her. "We're going to die, aren't we?" Secret didn't have the heart to lie. "Maybe. I'm not sorry I came to check on you. Even if it kills me, I'm not sorry." "You should be. You had a whole life ahead of you." "So did you. Still do." Tommy looked at her with eyes too old for his face. "My ma used to say that some people are born to do ordinary things, and other people are born to do impossible things. You're the impossible kind, Secret. You always have been. This is too impossible, even for me. Then we go down fighting, together." He squeezed her hand. "That's still better than going down alone." Secret squeezed back, unable to speak. That's when they heard the crack. A sound like the world breaking in half. Everyone froze. "What was that?" Mrs. Patterson whispered. Secret was already moving, grabbing her coat, running for the door. She knew that sound, had heard it in nightmares ever since the flood. Ice breaking, water moving, something terrible about to happen. She burst outside, and her worst fear confirmed itself. The creek, the same creek that had killed her parents, had frozen solid during the storm. But now, with the slight temperature rise and the weight of all the snow, the ice was breaking apart, and the water underneath was moving fast, angry, looking for a way out. straight toward the tunnel. "No," Secret breathed. "No, no, no." She ran toward the tunnel entrance, screaming for help. Dan and Joseph were there in seconds. "We need to redirect the flow," she gasped. "If that water hits the tunnel, all our wood will be soaked. Useless. We'll have nothing." "How do we redirect a creek?" Dan demanded. Secret's mind raced. "We build a dam. Use snow, ice, anything we can find. Channel the water around the tunnel instead of through it." They worked with desperate speed, the entire group mobilizing. They packed snow, piled rocks, used broken tree branches to create a barrier. The water kept coming, kept pushing, kept trying to find the path of least resistance. Secret's hands were bleeding again, her whole body shaking with cold and exhaustion. But she kept working, because stopping meant dying, meant watching everything her father built get destroyed by the same force that killed him. The irony wasn't lost on her. "It's not going to hold," Bill shouted. "It has to hold," Secret screamed back. The water hit their makeshift dam and paused, testing, probing. For one horrible moment, Secret thought it would break through. Then, slowly, reluctantly, it started flowing around the barrier, following the new path they'd created. The tunnel was safe. Secret collapsed in the snow, laughing and crying at the same time. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. But when she looked up, she saw Joseph staring at something in the distance, his face pale. "What is it?" "The road," he said quietly. "The water's flowing toward the road, toward the bridge." Secret's stomach dropped. The bridge was the only way in or out of this valley. If the water took it out, they'd be completely cut off. No rescue, no supplies. Just 30 people trapped on a hill with 1 day of firewood left. "We need to save that bridge," she said. "It's half a mile away," Dan protested. "In this cold? In this storm?" "If we lose it, we're all dead anyway." Secret stood, swaying slightly. "I'm going. Anyone who wants to come with me can. Anyone who wants to stay here and wait, that's fine too." She started walking before anyone could argue. Behind her, she heard footsteps. 10 people. 12. 15. Almost half the group following her into the storm. Because sometimes, Secret realized, survival wasn't about having enough. It was about risking everything on the belief that you could make more. And right now, she was betting everything on a bridge she couldn't even see through the snow. The half-mile walk felt like 50. Secret's legs burned with every step, her lungs screaming for air that was too cold to breathe comfortably. Behind her, the group struggled through snow that came up to their thighs. Nobody spoke. They didn't have the breath for it. When they finally reached the bridge, Secret's heart stopped. The water was already lapping at the supports, chunks of ice slamming into the wooden pilings with sounds like gunshots. The bridge was old, built by her grandfather's generation, and it had never been designed to withstand this kind of assault. "It's going to collapse," Joseph said flatly. "Maybe an hour, maybe less." "Then we have less than an hour to stop it." Secret turned to the group. "We need to reinforce the upstream side. Build a barrier to break up the ice flow before it hits the supports." "With what?" one of the men demanded. "We don't have materials. We don't have tools." "We have trees," Secret interrupted. She pointed to a stand of dead pines about 30 yards away. "We cut them down, drag them into position, create a breakwater. The ice will hit the trees instead of the bridge." "That's insane." "You have a better idea?" Silence. "Then start cutting." They attacked the trees with a fury born of desperation. Someone had brought an axe. Someone else had a handsaw. It wasn't enough, but they made it work, taking turns, swinging until their arms gave out, then passing the tools to the next person. Secret swung the axe until her hands bled through her gloves. The tree shuddered with each impact, showering her with ice and bark. Her shoulders felt like they were tearing apart, but she kept swinging. "Secret, stop!" Dan grabbed her arm. "You're going to kill yourself." "Then I'll die useful." She jerked away and swung again. The tree groaned, leaning, and then crashed down with a sound like thunder. They dragged it to the creek, 6 people pulling together, their feet slipping in the snow. The current grabbed at the tree, trying to pull it away, but they held on, wedging it against the bank, positioning it at an angle to deflect the ice. 1 tree down. They needed at least 5 more. "How's the bridge holding?" Secret shouted to Joseph, who was monitoring the supports. "Not well. We've got maybe 30 minutes." They worked faster, pushing past exhaustion, past pain, past the point where their bodies wanted to quit. Another tree fell, then another. They positioned each one carefully, creating a chevron pattern that would split the ice flow. But the water kept rising, and the ice kept coming. "It's not enough!" Bill Patterson was waist-deep in the creek, trying to secure a tree, his face gray with cold. "We need more weight, more mass." "The sleds," Secret said suddenly. "We empty the sleds and sink them between the trees, add more resistance." "Those sleds have our supplies." "And we won't need supplies if we're trapped here with no way out." Secret was already running back up the bank, calling for people to bring the sleds. They emptied them frantically, food, blankets, tools scattered in the snow, and dragged the empty sleds into the water. The current caught them immediately, slamming them into the tree barrier. But they held, wedging between the logs, creating a more solid wall. The ice hit the barrier and split, flowing around both sides instead of straight into the bridge supports. Secret watched, holding her breath, waiting to see if it would hold. A massive chunk of ice, easily the size of a car, came surging downstream. It hit the barrier dead center, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Then, slowly, the ice split in half and flowed around the barrier. The bridge shuddered, but held. "We did it," Dan breathed. "We actually did it." But Secret was staring at Bill Patterson, still standing in the water, and something was wrong. He wasn't moving. His face had gone from gray to white, his eyes unfocused. "Bill?" She started toward him. "Bill, you need to get out of the water!" He didn't respond, just swayed slightly, like a tree in the wind. "Help me!" Secret screamed, and Joseph was there instantly. They grabbed Bill under the arms and hauled him out of the creek. His whole body was rigid, his lips blue, his breathing shallow. "Hypothermia," Joseph said grimly. "Severe. We need to get him warm, now, or he's dead." "The cabin's too far. He won't make it." "Then what do we do?" Secret's mind raced. They needed heat, needed it immediately, but they were half a mile from the fire, and Bill was fading fast. She looked around desperately, and her eyes landed on the supplies they dumped from the sleds. "We build a fire, right here, right now." "Are you crazy? We'll burn through wood we need to survive." "Bill won't survive the next 10 minutes. We save him first, worry about tomorrow later." They gathered the driest wood they could find, some from the supplies, some from broken branches. Secret used her father's flint to strike sparks, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Once, twice, 3 times, the tinder caught. They fed the fire carefully, building it up until the flames were strong and hot. They stripped Bill's wet clothes off and wrapped him in whatever dry fabric they could find, holding him as close to the fire as they dared. "Come on, Bill." Mrs. Patterson was there suddenly, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Don't you dare die on me. Not after everything. Not now." Secret hadn't even realized Mrs. Patterson had followed them from the cabin. But here she was, cradling her husband's head in her lap, whispering to him like he was the only person in the world.
I was so angry at you, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice breaking. Angry for so many years. About our son, about this place, about everything we lost. I blamed you for bringing us here, for chasing a dream that killed our boy.
Bill's eyes flickered open.
Martha? I'm here. I'm right here. She pressed her forehead to his. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all the things I said, all the ways I hurt you.
I'm sorry too, Bill whispered. Should have listened to you. Should have turned back when you said. Doesn't matter now. Nothing matters except getting you through this. Secret turned away, giving them privacy. Joseph moved beside her, his face troubled. We used up a lot of wood for that fire. Wood we can't replace.
I know.
Was it worth it? Secret looked at Bill and Martha Patterson, holding each other like the world was ending, but at least they were together.
Yes, she said firmly. Yes, it was.
They stayed by the creek for another hour, making sure the barrier would hold, making sure Bill was stable enough to move. When they finally started back toward the cabin, Secret did a mental inventory of their resources. Less wood than before, less food, less hope. But Bill Patterson was alive, and that had to count for something. When they reached the cabin, the group that had stayed behind met them with news that made Secret's stomach drop.
The fire's dying, Tommy said quietly. We've been rationing, but we're down to maybe 12 hours of wood. After that,
he didn't need to finish the sentence. Secret looked at the 30 faces staring at her, waiting for her to have an answer, to pull another miracle out of thin air. But she had nothing left. No more ideas, no more tricks. Then we make those 12 hours count, she said finally. We stay warm, we stay together, and we pray this storm breaks before we run out. And if it doesn't, someone asked, then we die trying to survive. But at least we die having tried everything. The night that followed was the longest of Secret's life. They fed the fire one piece of wood at a time, making each log last as long as possible. People huddled together in groups, sharing body heat. Tommy stayed close to Secret, and she was grateful for his presence, for the reminder that she wasn't alone in this.
Tell me about your parents, Tommy said quietly. The real story.
Not the one everyone else tells. Secret was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, she began to speak. They were chasing a dream the day they died, trying to document how the flood patterns had changed in the creek over the past decade. My father thought if he could map the changes, he could predict future floods, maybe save lives. Her voice caught. They knew it was dangerous. They knew the water was high, but they went anyway because the data mattered more than the risk. That's not foolish, Tommy said. That's brave. It got them killed. It also saved you. You learned from them, learned how to think, how to survive, how to see patterns other people miss. Tommy squeezed her hand. They're still saving lives, Secret. Through you. Secret wiped her eyes. I'm not saving anyone. I'm just barely keeping us alive. That's more than anyone else could do. The fire burned lower. The wood pile shrank. Secret dozed fitfully, waking every hour to check their supplies, to count the pieces left, to calculate how much time they had remaining. 6 hours of wood. 4 hours. 2. When she woke at dawn, only 3 pieces of wood remained. 3 pieces for 30 people. Maybe an hour of heat, if they were lucky. Secret stood up, her decision made. Joseph, Dan, come with me. Everyone else, stay here and stay warm. Where are you going? Mrs. Patterson asked. To get more wood. There is no more wood. The tunnel's empty. Then we'll find wood somewhere else. Secret pulled on her coat. We'll tear down abandoned sheds. We'll dig through snowdrifts for fallen trees. We'll burn fence posts if we have to. But we're not giving up. They pushed back out into the cold, and Secret realized with shock that the wind had died down. Not stopped completely, but lessened. The snow was falling softer, gentler. The storm was breaking. "Look!" Dan pointed to the east, where a thin line of pale light was cutting through the clouds. "The sun! That's the sun!" Hope surged through Secret's chest. If the storm was ending, rescue could come. Supply trucks could get through. They just needed to hold on a little longer. They scavenged everything they could find. Old fence posts, broken furniture someone had abandoned in the snow, even some of the wood from their creek barrier. It wasn't much, maybe enough for another day, but it was something. When they got back to the cabin, Tommy met them at the door, his face flushed with excitement. "Radio's working again! I heard voices! Someone's trying to reach us!" Secret pushed inside and grabbed the old ham radio her father had kept. The static was terrible, but beneath it, she could hear a voice. "Anyone receiving? This is the National Guard. We're organizing rescue operations for stranded communities. If anyone can hear this, please respond." Secret grabbed the microphone with shaking hands. "This is Secret Brennan on Ridge Road. We have 30 people here. We're low on supplies. We need help." More static. Then, "Copy that, Ridge Road. Can you hold position for 24 hours? Roads are still impassable, but we're working on it." "We can hold," Secret said, though she wasn't sure if it was true. "We'll hold as long as we need to." "Good. Stay strong. Help is coming." The signal cut out, but it was enough. Secret turned to the group, and for the first time in days, she saw something other than fear in their faces. She saw hope. "One more day," she said. "We just need to survive one more day." They rationed the scavenged wood down to the splinter, keeping the fire just barely alive. People took turns sitting closest to the flames, rotating every 30 minutes so everyone got a chance to warm up. They shared what little food was left. They told more stories, sang old songs, did anything to keep their spirits up. But as the hours crawled by and the woodpile shrank again, Secret felt desperation creeping back in. 24 hours, the guard had said, but they barely had 12 hours of wood left, and that was assuming they could stretch it. "We're not going to make it," she told Joseph quietly. "Are we?" The old man looked at her with tired eyes. "Your grandfather used to say that survival isn't about having enough. It's about making do with what you've got and believing it'll be enough." "That's not exactly scientific." "No, but it's true." Joseph smiled faintly. "You've kept 30 people alive through the worst storm in 20 years. You've turned a hole in the ground into salvation. You've brought a whole community together. That's not science, Secret. That's magic." "I don't believe in magic." "Then call it faith. Call it determination. Call it whatever you want. But don't call it failure." Secret nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The last piece of wood went into the fire at sunset. They watched it burn, knowing that when it was gone, they'd have nothing but each other and the hope that help would arrive in time. The fire burned down to embers, then coals, then just a faint glow in the darkness. People huddled closer, sharing blankets, sharing warmth, sharing breath. Secret held Tommy on one side and Dan on the other, all of them shivering, all of them fighting to stay conscious as the cold crept in. "Tell another story," someone whispered. "Please." Secret's mind was foggy with cold, but she forced herself to speak. "Once upon a time, there was a girl who thought she could survive alone, who thought asking for help was the same as admitting defeat, who thought that strength meant never needing anyone." "What happened to her?" Tommy asked, his voice small. "She learned that she was wrong, that real strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to let others stand with you. That survival isn't a solo act. It's a community effort." "Did she survive?" Secret closed her eyes. "I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow." The night stretched on, endless and brutal. Secret drifted in and out of consciousness, her body shutting down to conserve heat. She dreamed of her parents, of the flood, of her father's voice telling her that wet wood won't save you. But dry wood wasn't saving her either. Nothing was saving her. She was dying, and she knew it. That's when she heard the sound, distant at first, then growing louder. A rumbling, mechanical sound that didn't belong to the storm, or the wind, or the night. Engines. Secret forced her eyes open. "Do you hear that?" Tommy stirred beside her. "What?" "Engines. Multiple engines." They stumbled to the window and stared out into the darkness. Lights. Dozens of lights, moving up the hill like a constellation coming to Earth. The National Guard had arrived. Secret's legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, laughing and crying and shaking all at once. They'd made it. Against every odd, against all logic, against the cold and the storm and the fear, they'd survived. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." And as the rescue trucks pulled up to her cabin, and guardsmen poured out with supplies and medical equipment and warm blankets, Secret Brennan understood that her father's final lesson wasn't about tunnels or airflow or the science of drying wood. It was about faith. Faith that even when everything seems impossible, even when the odds are stacked against you, even when you're down to your last piece of wood and your last breath and your last hope, sometimes, if you fight hard enough and believe strong enough and hold on just a little longer, sometimes you get your miracle. The guardsmen moved with military efficiency, but to Secret, everything felt like it was happening underwater. Someone wrapped a thermal blanket around her shoulders. Someone else pressed a bottle of water into her hands. Voices spoke to her, asking questions, but the words didn't quite register. "Miss, can you hear me? How many people are inside?" Secret's mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. She tried again. 30. Maybe more. I lost count." "Are any of them injured?" "Everyone's injured. Hypothermia, frostbite, exhaustion." She grabbed the guardsman's arm. "Bill Patterson. He was in the creek. He needs medical attention first." "We'll take care of everyone, ma'am. You need to sit down." "I'm fine." "You're barely standing." The guardsman, young, maybe 25, had kind eyes. "Please, let us help you." Secret wanted to argue, but her legs chose that moment to give out completely. The guardsman caught her before she hit the ground, and suddenly she was being carried toward one of the trucks, Tommy running alongside, calling her name. "I'm okay," she managed to say. "Tommy, I'm okay." "You're not okay. You're freezing, and you haven't eaten in 2 days, and—" His voice broke. "Don't you dare die after everything we went through." Not planning on it, Secret tried to smile, but her face was too numb. "How are the others?" "They're loading them into trucks. Everyone's alive, Secret. Everyone made it." The words hit her like a physical blow. Everyone made it. 30 people survived because of a tunnel she'd dug, because of knowledge her father had passed down, because of a community that had finally learned to help each other. They loaded her into a heated medical tent that had been set up beside the trucks. A paramedic started checking her vitals, asking questions she answered automatically. Temperature, pulse, blood pressure. All low but stable. "You're one tough kid," the paramedic said, wrapping a blood pressure cuff around her arm. "How old are you?" 16. The woman's eyes widened. 16, and you kept 30 people alive through that storm. "I had help." "I'm sure you did. But from what the guard captain's saying, you're the one who organized everything. The tunnel, the wood supply, the rescue coordination." The paramedic shook her head in disbelief. "That's remarkable." Secret didn't feel remarkable. She felt tired and cold and like she might fall apart if anyone showed her too much kindness. "Where's Joseph Whitehorse?" she asked suddenly. "Is he okay?" "The older gentleman? He's in the next tent over. Frostbite on his fingers, but he'll be fine." The paramedic smiled. "Keeps asking about you, actually. Says you're the strongest person he's ever met." Secret's throat tightened. "Can I see him?" "After we get some food and fluids in you. And after you let me treat those hands." Secret looked down at her hands for the first time in hours. The skin was cracked and bleeding, blisters layered on top of calluses, on top of old scars. They looked like they belonged to someone else, someone much older and harder than she felt inside. The paramedic cleaned and bandaged them, while Secret stared at the tent ceiling and tried not to cry. She'd made it. They'd all made it. So why did she feel like she was still waiting for something terrible to happen? "Secret?" Mrs. Patterson pushed into the tent, her face tear-streaked but determined. "I need to talk to you. I'm kind of busy right now. Bill's asking for you. The doctors say he's going to be okay, but he won't stop asking for you." Mrs. Patterson's voice shook. "Please, he needs to tell you something." Secret followed her to another tent, where Bill Patterson lay wrapped in blankets, an IV in his arm, his face still pale, but his eyes clear. When he saw Secret, he tried to sit up. "Easy," Secret said, pushing him back down gently. "You almost died. Again." "I know, and I need to say this before I lose my nerve." Bill took a shaky breath. "I was wrong about you, about your father, about everything. I called him a dreamer like it was an insult, but dreaming is what kept you alive, kept all of us alive." "Mr. Patterson, let me finish." His voice was stronger now. "I've been angry for so long, angry at this town, angry at the weather, angry at anyone who seemed happy when my life felt stuck. Your father represented everything I'd given up on: hope, innovation, the belief that things could be better. So I tore him down to make myself feel better about giving up on my own dreams." Secret didn't know what to say to that. "What I'm trying to tell you is that I'm sorry. And when we get through this, when things go back to normal, I want to help you rebuild. Whatever you need, materials, labor, expertise, it's yours. No charge, no strings. Just a man trying to make up for being a small-minded fool." Mrs. Patterson squeezed her husband's hand, crying openly now. "We both want to help, both of us." Secret felt something crack open inside her chest. Why now? Why does it take a disaster for people to care? "Because sometimes we need to lose everything to remember what matters," Bill said quietly. "And what matters is taking care of each other. Your father knew that. You know that. It's time the rest of us learned." Over the next few hours, as the guardsmen worked to evacuate people to the emergency shelter in town, Secret heard similar conversations repeated over and over. Dan Carlson promising to help restore her cabin. Sheriff Jensen admitting he'd underestimated her. Even people she barely knew stopping to thank her, to apologize, to promise they'd do better. It should have felt good. It should have felt like vindication. Instead, it felt exhausting. Tommy found her sitting outside the medical tent, staring at the snow. "They're asking for you inside. Want to do some kind of ceremony? Recognize what you did?" "I don't want a ceremony." "I figured. That's why I told them you were too tired." Tommy sat down beside her. "How are you really doing?" "I don't know." Secret pulled the thermal blanket tighter. "Everyone keeps thanking me, but all I keep thinking about is how close we came to dying. How if the guard had been even 2 hours later, we'd all be dead." "But we're not dead. We're alive because of you." "We're alive because of luck, because the storm broke when it did, because the radio started working, because you dug a tunnel that everyone said was impossible, Tommy interrupted firmly. Because you knew how to keep wood dry in Minnesota winter. Because you organized 30 panicking people and made them work together. That wasn't luck, Secret. That was you. Secret wanted to believe him, but all she could think about was her father's journal, still sitting on the table in her cabin, filled with designs and dreams that had cost him everything. My father died chasing his dreams, she said quietly. My mother died following him. What if everyone was right? What if dreams are just ways to get yourself killed? Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, My ma died of cancer when I was 10. Near the end, when she knew she wasn't going to make it, she told me something I didn't understand until now. What did she say? She said that dying while chasing your dreams isn't the tragedy. The tragedy is dying without ever having tried. Tommy looked at Secret with fierce intensity. Your parents died doing what they believed in. They died trying to make the world better, safer, more understandable. And they left behind a daughter who proved that their dreams weren't foolish. They were just ahead of their time. Secret felt tears streaming down her face.
I miss them so much.
I know, but they're still here, in that tunnel, in your hands, in every piece of wood that burned and kept us alive. Tommy put his arm around her shoulders. You didn't just survive that storm, Secret. You beat it. And you did it using everything your parents taught you. They sat together in silence until one of the guardsmen approached, clearing his throat awkwardly. Miss Brennan, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from the university. Secret looked up to find a man in his 50s, wearing glasses and carrying a leather satchel. He had the soft look of someone who spent more time with books than tools. Dr. Marcus Chen, he introduced himself, extending a hand. I'm a professor of engineering at the University of Minnesota. When the guard reported what you'd accomplished here, I had to see it for myself. I don't understand. Your tunnel, the air drying system. May I see it? Secret led him through the snow to the tunnel entrance, Tommy trailing behind them. Dr. Chen pulled out a flashlight and spent 20 minutes examining every detail. The angle of the shaft, the airflow channels, the way the rock shelf created natural circulation. When he finally emerged, his face was flushed with excitement. This is extraordinary. The engineering principles are sound, but the execution is brilliant. Whoever designed this understood thermodynamics at an intuitive level most of my graduate students never reach. My grandfather designed it. My father refined it. I just built what they taught me. You did more than that. You adapted it to different conditions, different materials, different constraints. Dr. Chen pulled out a notebook and started sketching. How long did it take the wood to dry? 3 weeks for green aspen, 2.5 for pine. In January, in Minnesota. He looked at her like she'd performed a miracle.
Do you understand what this means? If we can replicate this on a larger scale, we could revolutionize how remote communities handle firewood. Reduce smoke inhalation deaths, improve heating efficiency, cut wood consumption by half. Secret felt dizzy. You want to use my father's design? With your permission and full credit to your family, yes. I'd like to document the tunnel, run some tests, maybe even bring some graduate students up here to study it. Dr. Chen's eyes were bright behind his glasses. This is the kind of practical innovation that actually saves lives. It deserves to be preserved, studied, shared. My father would have liked that, Secret said softly. He always wanted his work to help people. Then we'll make sure it does. I'll need your consent, of course. And I'd like to offer you a provisional acceptance to our engineering program when you graduate high school. Full scholarship. We need more people who think like you do. Secret's head spun. College, a scholarship, her father's work being recognized. It was too much, too fast,
too overwhelming. "I'll think about it," she managed. "Take your time, but secret?" Dr. Chen's voice gentled. "What you did here, keeping yourself and 30 others alive through impossible conditions, that's not just survival. That's leadership. That's genius. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." After he left, Tommy let out a whoop of joy. "College! Full scholarship! Secret, that's amazing!" "It doesn't feel real." "None of this feels real, but it's happening anyway." Tommy grinned at her. "You're going to be famous. The girl who dug a tunnel and saved a town." "I don't want to be famous. I just want—" Secret stopped, realizing she didn't know what she wanted anymore. A week ago, all she'd wanted was to survive the winter alone, to prove she didn't need anyone. Now everything had changed. The next morning, after Secret had slept for 14 hours straight in the emergency shelter, she woke to find Joseph Whitehorse sitting beside her cot. "Brought you something," he said, holding out her father's journal. "Figured you'd want this safe." Secret clutched the journal to her chest. "Thank you." "Wanted to tell you something else, too. Your grandfather would have been proud of what you did. So would your father." Joseph's weathered face was serious. "But I'm also going to tell you what your grandfather told me when I was your age, and thought I could take on the world alone." "What's that?" "That being strong doesn't mean carrying everything yourself. It means knowing when to ask for help and when to give it. You learned the second part during that storm. Now you need to learn the first." "I asked for help," Secret protested. "I let people work with me." "Only after you nearly killed yourself trying to do everything alone. Only after that boy almost froze to death coming to check on you." Joseph's voice was gentle but firm. "You've got your father's brilliance and your mother's determination. But you also got their stubbornness, their belief that they had to prove themselves to a world that didn't appreciate them. And look where it got them. It got them a daughter who survived impossible odds. It got them a legacy that's going to help people for generations. It got them respect they never got while they were alive." Joseph leaned forward. "But it also got them killed younger than they should have been. Don't make the same mistake, Secret. Don't let pride kill you when you've got so much left to give." Secret thought about that for a long time after Joseph left. Thought about her parents dying in the flood, about Bill Patterson nearly freezing in the creek, about herself collapsed on the cabin floor, waiting for rescue that might never come. Maybe Joseph was right. Maybe strength wasn't about independence. Maybe it was about building something bigger than yourself, something that could hold you up when you couldn't stand alone. The town rebuilt slowly over the next few weeks. The National Guard helped clear roads and restore power. Families moved back into their homes. Life started returning to something like normal. Except nothing was normal for Secret anymore. People stopped her on the street to thank her. The hardware store gave her supplies for free. The church organized a fundraiser to help winterize her cabin properly. Tommy's father showed up with a crew of men and spent 3 days reinforcing the structure, adding insulation, replacing the broken door. "Consider it payment for saving my son's life," Dan said, when Secret tried to protest. The tunnel became a town landmark. People came from neighboring communities to see it, to understand how it worked. Dr. Chen returned with his graduate students and spent a week documenting everything, turning Secret's father's designs into proper engineering schematics. And through it all, Secret felt herself changing. The anger that had fueled her for months after her parents' death was fading, replaced by something quieter but stronger. Purpose, maybe. Or belonging. She was standing by the tunnel entrance in early March, watching the snow finally start to melt, when Mrs. Patterson approached. "Brought you something," the older woman said, holding out a wooden box.
Open it.
Inside was a photograph Secret had never seen before. Her parents, young and laughing, standing with Bill and Martha Patterson at what looked like a town festival. They had their arms around each other, all four of them smiling like they didn't have a care in the world.
That was taken 15 years ago, Mrs. Patterson said quietly. Before my son died. Before I got bitter. Before everything went wrong.
She touched the photo gently. Your mother was my best friend, Secret. Did you know that? Secret shook her head, unable to speak. We drifted apart after I lost my boy. I couldn't stand to be around anyone who seemed happy. And your mother. She was always so full of life, so optimistic. It hurt to be near her. So I pushed her away. Pushed your whole family away. Mrs. Patterson's voice broke. And then she died. And I realized I'd wasted years being angry at someone who only ever wanted to help me. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want you to make the same mistake. I don't want you to spend your life being angry at a world that hurt you. Your parents wouldn't have wanted that. Secret looked at the photograph, at her mother's smile, at the life that had existed before tragedy reshaped everything. What would they have wanted? For you to live, really live, not just survive, but thrive, to take their dreams and make them bigger, better, more beautiful than they ever imagined. Mrs. Patterson squeezed Secret's hand. To let people love you, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. That night, Secret sat in her newly reinforced cabin, warm for the first time in months, and opened her father's journal one more time. She read through all his notes, all his designs, all his dreams. And then she picked up a pen and started writing her own. Not to replace her father's work, but to build on it. To take what he'd started and carry it forward. To honor his memory not by preserving him in amber, but by proving that his ideas could grow and change and adapt to a world he'd never see. She wrote about modifications to the tunnel system, about ways to improve airflow, increase capacity, reduce construction time. She wrote about applications she'd thought of during the storm, emergency shelter design, water collection systems, root cellars that could double as storm refuges. And she wrote about community, about how the real innovation wasn't just the engineering. It was getting people to work together, to share resources, to believe that survival was a collective effort. When Tommy stopped by the next morning, he found her surrounded by papers, her hands cramped from writing, her eyes bright with a kind of energy he hadn't seen since before the storm. What's all this? Plans, ideas, dreams. Secret looked up at him, and for the first time in months, she felt something like joy. I'm going to take Dr. Chen's scholarship. I'm going to study engineering. And when I graduate, I'm coming back here. Back here? Why? Because this is home. Because there are people here who need the kind of innovations my father was working on. Because I want to build things that matter, not just for me, but for everyone. She handed him a sketch. Look, a community heating system based on the tunnel principle. Centralized wood drying that serves multiple families. We could cut fuel costs by half, reduce smoke pollution, make winter survivable for people who can't afford. You're going to change the world, Tommy interrupted, grinning. Aren't you? Secret grinned back. I'm going to try. And this time, I'm not doing it alone. The spring arrived slowly, cautiously, like it wasn't quite sure it was welcome. But it came. The snow melted. The creek returned to its normal levels. Birds started singing again. Secret planted a garden where her parents used to keep one, using seeds that Joseph brought her from his homestead. She fixed the fence. She painted the cabin door. She made the place feel less like a survival bunker and more like a home. And every evening, she sat on the porch with Odin and watched the sun set over the valley where she'd almost died, where she'd learned to live, where she discovered that the strongest foundations aren't built on independence. They're built on the understanding that we all need each other to survive. On the anniversary of her parents' death, Secret hiked to the creek where they'd drowned. She brought flowers, wildflowers she'd picked from her garden, and stood at the water's edge for a long time. "I did it," she told them. "I survived. I proved your designs worked. I made people see what you were trying to build." She wiped her eyes. "And I learned something you maybe never got the chance to learn. That dreams are worth chasing, but people are worth holding on to. That innovation means nothing if you're too proud to share it." That survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most self-sufficient. It's about building something bigger than yourself and trusting others to help you hold it up. She placed the flowers in the water and watched them drift downstream, carried by the same current that had taken her parents. But this time, instead of feeling like an ending, it felt like a beginning. Secret Brennan wasn't the lonely orphan girl anymore, digging in the dirt while the world laughed at her. She was a survivor, a leader, an engineer in training with a vision for a better future. She was someone who'd turned a hole in the ground into hope, who'd transformed a town's mockery into respect, who'd proven that the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from knowing when to let others stand beside you. And when the next winter came, and it would come, winters always do, she'd be ready. Not because she could face it alone, but because she'd never have to again.